Absolute banger coming up this weekend at Bantamweight. One of my favorite guys to watch in all of MMA. You know him as the man, Rani Yahya. This is a guy from Team Constrictor. He's an ADCC champ. He's a 4th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. This guy, when he takes a neck, an arm, a leg home, it's gone. This is a guy that fought Mike Brown in the UFC. He's been around forever. And for Kyung Ho Kang out of South Korea, I equally think as high of him as I do of Rani Yahya. And the reason why is because for Kang, he's such a fun fighter to watch. He's got exciting stand-up. He's got great submission abilities. If he gets taken down, he gets back up to his feet. He's such a fun guy to watch coming out of Team Mad over in Busan. Matt, this is a fight that was originally supposed to take place a number of months ago. We covered it extensively. Let's throw it on back to that original video. Update you as to why it's taking place in November, give you the new odds, and give you a pick on this one. Absolutely love this fight, and shouts to Max Friedman over on Twitter. He knew as soon as this one was announced to at me, at Craig Allen FNP. But Matt, we have a couple of my guys. Kyung Ho Kang is going to be taking on Rani Yahya. And if you can't feel the excitement through the screen, I have no better way to share it. Like, do you want my microphone? Do you want my shirt? Do you want my blood? I don't know what to tell you. I absolutely love this fight. Kyung Ho Kang, he's a guy that I've been excited about for a really long time. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Teruto Ishihara, you've got a big win against Liu Pingyuang his last time, and that one was by split. And before that, a split against Brandon Davis. But Kyung Ho Kang, he's like a Swiss Army knife. He's just kind of good everywhere. He can mix in his striking. He's a really tricky guy to try and figure out on the feet. And just when you think you've got him figured out, like Guido Canetti, well, he's just going to whip out one of the craziest takedowns you've ever seen. He's going to submit you. This guy is, and I say it again, a Swiss Army knife. And you look at it, I mean, big wins over fighters from Japan in the UFC. Sunichi Shimizu, Mishinori Tanaka, and Teruto Ishihara. You look at it, his debut was back in 2013 against Alex Caceres. He fought Chico Camus. He fought Ricardo Ramos. That was back in 2018. Had a lengthy layoff from 2014 to 2018. Mandatory military service over in Korea. But man, I'm so glad we have my guy, Mr. Perfect, Kyung Ho Kang, back in the UFC, because he's one of those guys that I feel like if he fought more often, he'd be like a more well-known fighter. I know that sounds stupid as I say it, but I wouldn't bridge on fan favorite. But listen, when I'm talking fan favorite, if you don't know my guy, Rani Yahya, by now, where have you been? Like, straight up, where have you been? This guy's coming into this fight at 36. He's almost 37. He's fought a litany of fighters. He has a fight against Chad Mendes. His UFC debut was at UFC Fight Night 23 against Mike Brown back in 2011. He has a win over Eddie Wineland with WEC. You remember how Eddie Wineland was the WEC bantamweight champ? Rani Yahya beat him with WEC. He fought Kid Yamamoto and got knocked out by soccer kicks because that happened in K1. But other than that, really special fighter. First round rear naked choke win at WC 28 over one Mark Hominick, Canadian legend. I can go on and on about Rani Yahya. He's one of the more accredited jiu-jitsu players in MMA. Obviously, you have the Damian Maias, you have the Rodolfo Vieiras. Rani Yahya cannot be denied. Matt, I think the craziest stat of all, this guy has 27 wins. 21 of them are by submission, all different types as well. North-south choke over John Hosman. You look at it in the UFC, he had a headbutt against Johnny Bedford. So what does he do? He comes out and Kimuras him the next time out. Such a special fighter. Also beat Mishinori Tanaka in the UFC. And his last time out, he beat Ray Rodriguez earlier this year and submitted him. So my guy, Rani Yahya, still doing it. He kind of walks in like a what's that Pop Smoke song? Like a thief in the night? Like a thief on the night. Like a thief in the night? Like a thief on the night. Like a thief in the night? Creepy guy. But Matt, this guy's a special fighter.
He's the stiffest thief you've ever seen. Like, when I think of a thief in the night, I think of someone, you know, with some fluidity to their movement. Ronnie's got none of that. Like, the before and after pictures on most chiropractic commercials, Ronnie moves like the before. You know, and then they crack his back, and then he moves like someone who could be considered a thief in the night, perhaps. But Ronnie is weird because every Rani Yahya fight is like, hey, I feel like the opposing corner just slaps the fighter in the face, and they go, hey, don't let him get that head and arm position. And the fighter goes, great, I'm not going to let Rani Yahya get that head and arm position. And then at some point, I'm going to guess in the second, maybe even the third round, Rani Yahya finds himself in top position in like a head and arm choke, and he ends up winning. He's just crafty on the mat that way. And Rani Yahya isn't that kind of, he's like 70% of Ryan Hall, where he's not going to openly go for guard, like pull guard 12 times in a row, but he will pull guard. He is not afraid to do it in modern MMA, which is very much a lost art when you speak about things that used to be in MMA a lot that now you don't really see all that often. Ronnie is not afraid to pull guard. The other thing about Rani Yahya, though, that we have just sort of glanced over, his cardio is terrible nowadays. Like, he moves like a 37-year-old Brazilian man would. And hey, there's no shame against that, but he's had 38 fights in his career. You're going to start accumulating damage at a certain point. And he is one of those fighters where it really comes down to, can Ronnie submit his opponent before the end of the second round? Or is he going to try to survive that third round? Because a lot of the time it does come down to him just trying to survive that last 5 minutes and not really fighting to win, but fighting not to lose. And I know that leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths because it might not be the most fan-friendly style, but it's obviously hooked Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks, and that should really be all you need to know about Rani Yahya's fighting style. What I will say is that Yahya, at least as of late, has been in there with guys who have terrible submission defense, and it has made his skill set maybe look a little bit better than I think it truly is. Like, if you're going to beat Luke Saunders, how are you going to beat him? Well, you're probably going to heel hook him. If you're going to beat Russell Stone, how are you going to beat him? Well, you're probably going to submit him. Like, there's just Ray Rodriguez has like 15 losses and 13 of them are by submission. Like, Rani Yahya has been in there with some guys who are susceptible to the submission. I'm not saying he's not phenomenal on the mat, but I don't think Rani Yahya is the type of guy who can go out there and out-grapple a guy like Ryan Hall. I do put his grappling like maybe a tad bit underneath the top tier grapplers of this division, and this is the reason why. He doesn't really have the wrestling to go along with his jiu-jitsu. Rani Yahya is one of those guys who if he just had like a power double, like he'd be that much more effective because a lot of his energy is spent trying to get his opponent to the mat. And then by the time he gets them down, he's only got like 30% of his energy to then try to go get a submission. For Kyung Ho Kang, if he could just keep this fight on the outside and again, use the space in between him and Ronnie as his takedown defense, I really do feel like he can just start accumulating not record-breaking levels of volume, but he can definitely go out there and out-volume Rani Yahya on the feet for 15 minutes.
Rani Yahya got COVID. So ultimately, the first fight, that one was canceled. Now we end up here months and months later. And for Ronnie, he's an Instagram model for sauna suits. And I'm going to put that picture right up there.
Why wouldn't he be?
But for Kyung Ho Kang, he's just an Instagram model, period. I mean, go look at his Instagram. It's weird.
He grew out the salad.
He did grow the salad out, the dirty fruit salad in the back. But for Kang, he's Mr. Perfect with his hair and what he does in the cage. For Ronnie, listen, that guy might walk around like the miles have caught up to him, but once he starts rolling down the road, it's like an old jalopy. It's like, look at that guy, that Oldsmobile. Man, that looks awful. And then he pulls up to a stoplight, puts his foot to the floor. Wow, it purrs. So for Rani Yahya, when he's fighting guys like Ray Rodriguez, submitting them, it's easy stuff. When he's fighting Enrique Barzola, it's a little close. When he's fighting Ricky Simone, it's not as close. But when he's fighting Luke Sanders, Russell Doan, big Russell Doan.
He wasn't good.
Russell Doan, 3 years, 8 months ago. But Rani Yahya, he's been around forever, and his jiu-jitsu is some of the best in all of MMA.
Yeah, like, you don't even want to mess with Ronnie on the mat. You don't, because he has that one-shot, one-kill type of jiu-jitsu that you do not want to mess around with, even for a second. And that's why a lot of the guys who do end up beating him are just so good at wrestling that they don't really have to entertain any of those grappling situations in the first place. Like, that's exactly what Ricky Simone did. Ricky Simone, who's a good but not great striker. We've seen him get outstruck by the other top-tier guys in the division, but we know him for his great offensive and defensive wrestling. But Simone decided, hey, I'm going to fight like Chuck Liddell all of a sudden. I'm just going to use my wrestling in a defensive setting, and I'm going to force Yahya to become a striker. Now, for Simone, it was able to work, and he looked really good in that fight. But that really is the key when you're fighting a guy like Ronnie. You don't have to defend submissions if you don't get put in them in the first place, and that's always the key when you're fighting him. Now, this is a really, really interesting fight because for Kyung Ho Kang, a lot of his wins are by submission. If you look, he's a phenomenal grappler himself. But the difference is the way that these guys get their submissions. Kong's a guy who will hit you, drop you, get some ground and pound, soften you up a little bit, and then look for the submission that way. It's a lot less of, oh, I get the single leg to the mat, I get side control, you give me a bad position, and then we start scrambling for submissions. For Kong, it is a lot more of that, oh, I hurt you on the feet, and then I'll finish you with the submission. And that's why this fight's going to be really interesting, because Ronnie's one of the worst strikers in the UFC. Here's the thing. Now, when you're as good at grappling as he is, you can get away with it, but there's always two things you have to think about when you break down a Rani Yahya fight. And even you, his biggest believer, will have to agree with this. He rarely wins third rounds. Rarely. And his striking defense isn't very good. So for me, I always wonder at what stage of his career is he at to where his durability is going to go. Because he's someone who can rely on his chin a little bit. He can take a shot to close distance. But I don't think this is the matchup you really want to be risking that in.
You're telling me a guy that's 3 weeks away from being 37 of bantamweight is going to start to slow down at some point?
I know, it's surprising.
And for Kyung Ho Kang, it's a shame that, listen, we lost a little bit of his prime because the guy's just turned 34. I mean, looking like a dime on the IG, like I said. But if you want to see his best performance, when he fought Diego Rivas, what was it? That was like the February. Was that Jeremy Stevens, Josh Emmett? Was it that card?
It was a while ago, yeah.
It was gross. But in that fight for Kang, like, who was it? Paddy Pimblett, Manikivi? Was that who it was? Who did he fight over with Cage Warriors? Flying Triangle. Either way.
I just think Jimmy Flick Cody Durden now.
Wild finish in that one. Kang had one of those crazy finishes in that fight. Alexis Savitas, that's who it was.
There we go.
But for Kyung Ho Kang, I think he's a much better striker than Rani Yahya. I think he's got good enough defensive hips so that he doesn't have to worry about getting taken down as much. Career 71% takedown defense. He's got a fight of the night split decision win over Tanaka back years ago. The Kennedy win. Lost to Ricardo Ramos by split decision. Beats Teruto Ishihara. Beats Brandon Davis. Beats Liu Pingwang. Both of those two last ones by split decision. Cardio King and Liu Pingwang. Where is he at? Because he's a fun fighter to watch. But Rani Yahya, like we said time and again, he's been around forever. The odds are at par on this fight right now. If you have strong feelings either way, let us know down below in the comments section. Wow. Over on Tapology, not strong feelings, but they are. 788 total votes, 62% Yahya, 64% by decision. For the 38% that have Kang, 68% by jumpins decision, 18% by knockout. Matt, at this point in the show, I'm having a hard time containing my excitement.
I got a spicy take.
Because I love this fight. I just can't take poor Ronnie here.
I think Kyung Ho Kang's going to win by third round stoppage, too. I think he's going to knock him out, to be completely honest with you. Because this is the thing about Yahya. I forget what other fighter you had brought this up about, but you said in the first round, his hands start by his chest, which already isn't a great thing. And by the third round, they're by his waist. That's my thing with Ronnie. I can't even trust him in that first round to at least stay sound defensively before fatigue sets in. And that's what I think Kong's going to just be able to get off to such a big lead that's going to force Yahya, kind of similar to the Ricky Simone fight where he's shooting those desperation takedowns from halfway across the cage. And those are never the fights you want to see Rani Yahya involved in. So I like Kyung Ho Kang quite a bit.
Ronnie also has a fight against Mishinori Tanaka. He won by decision. Then he lost to Joe Soto by decision, who was in one of the craziest title fights of all time in the UFC. But Matt, both of us in this fight going with South Korea's Kyung Ho Kang, which, again, it's deviation from the mean here at Fight Night Picks. It was just like picking Moises to beat Yoel Alvarez. You're on that Alvarez train, you get off it, and look at what happens. So, let us know down below in the comments section who you have between Yahya and Kang. Matt, two more fights on this card. You've got Michael Chiesa taking on Sean Brady. It's dynamic. It's a grappler's paradise in the main event. Ketlin Vieira against Miesha Tate. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.